things are finally going to change. The February 2023 ban list was probably one of the most impactful ban lists we've had in recent history. It definitely addressed quite a few problems in the format, and it's definitely going to shake up the format a lot. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what I felt would be the 15 most talked about decks, not necessarily the 15 best decks or the most relevant decks. I just decided to condense it down to what I believe would be the 15 most looked at decks. I just figured you guys should know about these decks and where they're going to go for the future upcoming format. So, of course, without any further ado, let's just hop straight into it. Starting off with Tearlaments, of course, biggest loser of the last ban list. Definitely lost a lot. It definitely will still function decently well as sort of like a pile deck where you combine a bunch of good engines together. So like you're not able to really play like a Shizu Tearlament as a deck now because all these Shizu cards are essentially gone, the Tearlament cards are essentially gone. But if you pair them up with like other powerful engines, so like the Mechanco stuff is just an example of what people have been looking at right now. It can be particularly strong and still put out those nasty end boards just by swapping a few cards around, playing some like old favorites like Diviner the Herald. So definitely still a deck to look out for. Of course, it's not going to be anywhere near as dominant as it was before. In fact, it may even slip down to like upper tier 2 eventually as the format goes on if people like find that this new spicy version isn't as good as they thought it was. But for now, definitely still keep an eye out for this deck. I still think it's worth like citing a bit of hate for it or like playing as if they're still a decent contender in the meta. Next up is Spright. So of course losing Elf hurts a lot in its own deck. Losing Elf means now you have no like consistent follow-up. You're gonna have to play in a way to where even if your board gets broken, you're still able to play on the following turn. Elf back in the day gave you that option where you could summon back like a blue or a jet to search your follow-up, or summon back a red or a carrot for some extra disruption. But now that Elf is gone, when you're redoing your combo, my guess is that your Jet is probably going to have to search a starter unless you already have an extra one, just so you have a play guaranteed for the next turn. It might just be too risky to like commit everything with like a double cross or a smashers and hope your opponent can't break the board. That being said, their end boards are still going to be okay, I feel like. Off the top of my head, I'm not so sure how easily you can make Toad anymore, but what I instantly thought of was Pit Knight early plus IP Masquerena. So Pit Knight early, for those of you who don't know, essentially if something it points to activates its effect, you can like imperm a monster your opponent controls. So the idea I was thinking was you can put Pit Knight early in the extra monster zone, put IP Masquerena under it. Since they're both linked 2s, you can still make them under the starter lock and the gigantic Spright lock. And then from there, after you imperm one of their monsters, you can instantly turn it into a copy of Mech Knight Crusader Abramax, which can still be problematic for many decks out there to deal with. So it's definitely not a terrible choice. But with that being said, like if you are unable to really make Toad, then your end boards may just be fully reliant on having like red and carrot as like your disruptions, and you're just playing like a bunch of hand traps in that case, sort of like a control build. One last thing about Spright before I move on. I was thinking very briefly in my head, there might be some way to abuse the Spright engine as like a going second deck. Like I know it sounds weird, but with a card like Shadow Mosquito, which can OTK, and you can play with the ability to play like a bunch of hand traps now, like it's definitely possible that Spright can still do something going second. So also keep an eye out for Spright. But once again, Tearlaments and Spright definitely not gonna be nowhere as dominant as they were before. Next up, Flu. Everyone's most favorite deck, of course. Losing Barrier Statue definitely hurts. That's the biggest reason I think their end boards were so hated was because of that Barrier Statue, because it's a searchable part of their engine. Like the thing with Dimension Shifter is like, yeah, it sucks that they have it, but like it's not a searchable card by any means, so they're not going to have it all the time. Whereas if they resolve their combo, they're essentially getting Barrier Statue all the time with a way to protect it. So taking away the Barrier Statue now means their end board's just going to be either M-Pen or Apex Avion, or like their Robina's gonna have like a DD Crow or something, and that's just not that great. So I think Flu is gonna be like a rogue deck at best. Like, yeah, I can still play Shifter, but like suddenly like the best deck of the format doesn't lose to Shifter, which makes Flu like not the best anti-meta choice in my opinion. So definitely Floowandereeze took a big hit here, and I don't really think it's gonna be that relevant in the format anymore. But on the other side of the coin, Kashtira, like without a doubt, is gonna be the best deck of the format. I think that's what Konami was trying to push for as well with this ban list. I don't really think I have to say much about this. Just expect a lot of Kashtiras. Maybe some Kashtira Tearlaments builds. Like, I think those could still be viable, but just in general, a lot of Kashtiras. So definitely prepare for this deck pretty much everywhere you go. Next up is Runick. So, like, I'm thinking of, like, Runick Stun specifically. So, like, with a bunch of floodgates and stuff. Runick can definitely be, like, a great anti-meta deck, I think, in almost any format. Their cards are just very flexible. They have options for everything pretty much. They can play like all the floodgates in the game. Essentially, they can also get access to all the different like disruptions, so like the MST, the Imperm, like popping a monster. Like you just have everything to access with the Runick cards, and it has an insane grind game as well with Fountain. So I would say it's probably going to be like a tier 2 deck. It's definitely going to be like an anti-meta option. So like maybe like the Eldritch of like past formats, like it'll be around a little bit. You'll see some of it here and there just as like a way to counter the meta for someone who doesn't want to play it. But I don't think it's going to be taking over by any means, but definitely do watch out for Runicks. And I think you should probably respect them a little bit just because the cards are still incredibly powerful, and you can also splash in a lot of other things as well with the Runick cards. Next up is Labrynth. So this is the deck that I personally think has one of the most potential like next format. This is one of the big decks that in the OCG that was doing pretty well, I believe right around a few months or a few weeks ago. I think in the TCG it's also going to be really good. The fact that it's able to compete with Kashtira decently well, it's able to play a myriad of different traps, which means it has a lot of flexibility. I think that means it can definitely quickly outpace like any top meta deck out there. So you definitely have to watch out for this. And I think because of that, you should probably still respect those like back row decks out there like this. I'm not too knowledgeable on the deck itself, but I would just say definitely watch out for this deck. They're getting this new card in Photon Hypernova as well, which will definitely make them a lot better than they were before. And then next up, perhaps a surprising one, is Dinos. I know Dinos doesn't really get talked about, but I think people are going to start looking at Dinos at least, because with the Ishizu Shufflers leaving, now cards like Miscellaneous Source are going to stay in the graveyard, and you're going to be able to resolve one of your strongest cards more often now. Perhaps there's something you can do with True King Lithosygem as well. Even though Diagram's at 1, you can use Lithosygem to destroy the Baby Ceratosaurus and Petit Pteranodon to get your combo started and rip cards out of your opponent's extra deck, which can be really good. So I don't think this will be any better than a rogue deck, but definitely just be aware. I feel like some people are going to start looking at this. It was always like a decent rogue deck, but now that a key card like the Ishizu Shufflers are probably not going to see much play, it definitely has the opportunity to be a lot better now. Next up is SwordSoul. SwordSoul's always been that like good deck. It's always been decent. It's never been the best deck in a long time, but it's always been like a solid pick no matter what. I think in this format, SwordSoul is also going to be okay. They have the ability to play a lot of hand traps, which is great to stop a deck like Kashtira. The biggest problem I find with SwordSoul is under a card like Kashtira or Rise Heart, they may struggle to get a lot of their advantage going because their Tenyis will lose out value from not being in the graveyard. When you synchro off with a card like Moye or Taya, you're not going to be able to get like their effects. So it's not going to be that great playing into a Rise Heart, but it's definitely a great pick, I think, because it can go first well, of course. It can go second decently well with like the hand traps it plays, and it doesn't necessarily auto lose to like banishing type cards like Dimension Shifter and such. So definitely be aware that SwordSoul I think is still going to be a thing. Next up, just in general, Pendulums like Draco Slayers, Endymions with Servant down at 3. I think these are going to be an interesting option. There are definitely going to be people who are going to play the deck, I think. It's a great combo deck. Of course, going first, Pendulum, like in history, has been incredibly strong, being able to set up pretty much anything. Like they can go like rank 4s, synchros, if they want to. They can set up like locks with like the Amorphage cards. So there's just a lot of options for Pendulum players. But I think the biggest reason perhaps is that the Pendulum players can actually play like huge cards like Raw Sphere Mode and Lava Golem, and like even in the main deck. Cards that Kashtira can't really beat outright unless they play some weird cards to stop them. So I think having access to those, like even in the main deck, means Pendulum can have a chance going second as well into Kashtira. So definitely be aware of Pendulums as well. It's probably going to be tier 2 in my opinion. I think Endymion to 3 probably isn't going to make them that much better. but I think just now that the format shifted a bit away from the tiers, Pendulum now have more of a better chance to shine. Next up is going to be Dragon Link, so just Bestial Dragon Link. The deck, of course, is still really powerful. It's a great combo deck. It's always has been a great combo deck. Good going first, and it was great going second, even into like tier, because all the Bestials, which are part of your engine, are now like hand traps. But the biggest problem now is that since tiers probably won't be that popular, your Bestials probably aren't going to get as much value as you normally would in back when tier was running around everywhere. So I definitely think this is still a strong deck, probably like top of tier 2, maybe like tier 1.5-ish. But I think its popularity is probably going to drop off a little bit just because there's not that many tiers around anymore. But I could be completely wrong about this. Maybe some people just really like the Dragon deck and they can do something crazy with it. Speaking of crazy, I think the branded stuff is actually pretty good. Of course, with the new like support, there's so many good cards for branded. The biggest problem I have with branded is that they are probably going to struggle to go against a Rise Heart without like non-engine cards. They definitely benefit from getting stuff into the graveyard, getting a lot of their advantage from the graveyard and setting up their fusion plays from there. So I think it'll be pretty difficult for them to necessarily like crack a board without like having hard drawn like any specific going second cards. But at the same time, like it's not like they can't play at all, because like Branded Fusion can still summon Lubellion, and then you can still shuffle back Albaz from the bench to summon Mirror Jade or something. Although you won't be able to use Mirror Jade because it needs to send to grave as cost. But nonetheless, like Branded, I definitely think it's this very strong deck. Has a lot of potential, and just Branded Fusion is still one of the best cards I think in the game. So be aware of that as well. Next up is Exosister. I think this deck sucks. Like even when tier was a thing, I think this deck sucked. I think it's even worse now. Like it's probably like I might even say it's like on the level of Flu, if not worse. Just because like the best matchup it had was against Tearlaments, but now that Tearlaments are like gone in a sense, or less popular at least, you're not gonna get that matchup you want a lot of the times. And I don't think this deck is beating a deck like Kashtira very consistently. So for that reason, I think it's no better than Rogue at best. Next up is the Mechanco deck. Like just Mechanco like rituals with like the Libromancer stuff. It's a crazy combo deck, honestly, and it generates a lot of advantage. I'm not too sure how it plays going second, so I can't really say too much about that. But I just wanted to bring to your attention, like this is probably a thing that people are going to try just because the new Mechanco cards are actually pretty decent. Next up is Dark World. This was like a copium deck that a lot of people like myself really wanted to be good. And I think this format, like maybe like because I feel like people are going to start taking Bestials out of their deck and the Shufflers out of their deck. So like possibly there's a chance that like your stuff will stick in the graveyard. But then again, like with other decks that lose to a Rise Heart, it's just so difficult to beat that card unless you have like a hard draw non-engine card, which just isn't that consistent. So I think Dark World's still not really going to be that much better, but I just want to put this out there because some people might start trying to play it a bit more just because there are less Bestials and Shufflers now. And the last deck I'm going to quickly cover is Naturia. Naturia was always like an interesting deck. People combined it with like the Runick cards. Those were kind of cool. But they also played it with like the Ishizu cards. But now the Ishizu cards are all limited. It definitely takes away a lot of the power of the deck. There's a lot of great synergy there as well, being able to just resolve like your Versatility to like dump the Ishizu cards. Those are pretty good. But now that that's gone, like hindered severely, I'm not so sure this deck will be very good. Like I thought it wasn't great to begin with, but I think now it's probably going to be even worse. So I'd say like maybe it's like a rogue deck at best. If you combine it with the Runicks, it could be a bit more competitive. So I probably wouldn't worry too much about this matchup unless there's some like crazy tech in there I haven't thought of. So yeah, that's going to do it for just my very quick rundown of what I think the 15 most talked about decks are going to be. So just be aware that these, you may see like all of these or like some of these being played like at your next tournament once this ban list is legal. So just be aware that these cards are still around in the format, even the stuff that got hit like Tearlaments and Spright. So that's going to do it for this video. Let me know if you think I missed any key decks in the description below, and let me know what you're playing this format, as long as it's not Kashtira. Because I'm curious to see what people are going to use to try to beat the best deck of the format. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.